introduction, also because we also have the event being streamed live on Facebook. My name is Stefano Mallia. I am the President of the Employers Group in the European Economic and Social Committee. The Employers Group, very briefly, is one of the three groups forming the European Economic and Social Committee, and this brings together over 100 entrepreneurs and representatives of entrepreneurial associations from every EU country. Therefore, our members are people who are active in the business world and are active in the business world in their individual home countries. And therefore, this means that we are in a unique position to bring the day-to-day reality of companies to the EU decision makers. I am pleased that this webinar is being held in cooperation with the German Presidency of the European Council, and it takes place, needless to say, at one of the most challenging times for Europe. Germany has clearly been working very hard to deliver on its motto, Together for Europe's Recovery. I think we can say that Europe is delivering when it comes to the issue of having a vaccine available as early as possible for EU citizens. And I trust and hope that the German presidency can also manage to convince all EU leaders this week to sign on the EU's multi-financial framework and the EU's Resilience and Recovery Fund. Equally, we are looking anxiously at the negotiations with the UK in the hope that a deal will be struck sooner rather than later. I believe that we have enough uncertainty surrounding us in today's world, so if we could indeed wrap up the Brexit negotiations in a satisfactory manner, that would indeed be a good plus in what has been a very difficult year. Today, we will focus on two of the most influencing trends of our time: decarbonization and digitalization. The way in which Europe will master these challenges will have a decisive impact on how the continent will position itself globally in the years to come. Bringing the EU to the forefront of digital innovation and seizing the opportunities provided by proactive climate action are two of the priorities that frame the work of our group, the Employers Group. Starting with the first topic of digitalization, European employers strongly support the key goal of restoring Europe's digital sovereignty. It is our firm view that investing in digitalization is one of the best ways for the EU and its member states to come out of the current economic hardship, support the recovery, safeguard production capacity, and hence jobs, and also at the same time create new jobs. Last week, we had Commissioner Vestager, who was speaking at our plenary session, and she said that we needed to come out of this crisis stronger and learn from it, because this is how we can become well prepared in the field of digitalization and innovation. The forthcoming initiatives in the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act will be presented next week by the European Commission. In fact, indeed, even us as the European Economic and Social Committee, these are new dossiers which we'll be dealing with over the coming days. And we will have a rapporteur on the Digital Services Act, and we will have a co-rapporteur on the Digital Markets Act. So clearly, our group, the Employers Group, will play a proactive role in putting forward our views on these two important dossiers. The same goes for the topic of decarbonization. Decarbonizing industry will see energy-intensive companies such as steel, cement, and chemical sectors take on high energy costs, while simultaneously imposing a massive structural change on the industrial, transport, and energy sectors, with the risk of ultimately placing them at an economic disadvantage in a competitive global market. And this, I think, stresses the need that the transition to decarbonization needs to take place on a global scale. We need to be clear that the transition to a decarbonized economy is happening and is inevitable. As employers, we must embrace this transition and the necessary changes this will bring. However, the transition must be well balanced between the social, environmental, and economic realities we are all facing. I think this is where we, the Employers Group, will play a very active role over the coming months in terms of ensuring that the transition doesn't indeed take place, but it takes place in a well-balanced manner. The current corona crisis might be a time to adapt our compass for future direction in many sectors. In order to tackle decarbonization and digitalization and use these trends to our advantage, the right conditions are needed for companies of all sizes to thrive and grow. Therefore, political strategies need to be defined clearly and in a timely manner. And I am looking forward indeed to the debate on these two important elements. Before I hand over the moderation of this event to our member, Sandra Party, who is also the head of the Brussels office of the German Economic Institute, I would like to especially thank her and to thank Heiko Willems for the work and the efforts they put into organizing this event. I'm looking forward to the debate with all of our speakers, and we have some very high profile and high level speakers. And thank you in advance for your participation, which I hope will bring constructive and practical recommendations. If we do manage, and I'm sure we will, manage to draw some meaningful recommendations from what we discussed today, our intention is to use these recommendations, one, to shape our work as the Employers Group in the coming months, but also we will use these recommendations directly with relevant commissioners such as Commissioner Timmermans and Commissioner Vestager. With that, I will wrap up my introductory remarks. I will, before passing on the floor to Sandra, I do encourage Group 1 members to participate in the time that we have open for debate. We have put half an hour available after each round of interventions from our speakers on the two topics, and therefore I do encourage you to actively participate so that this can be a very active and live webinar. Thank you very much, and Sandra, I now pass the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you for the opportunity to have this event under the German presidency and have this really interesting exchange here. I have the pleasure of actually being able to moderate this and also do this from the venue of the EESC committee. So I'm hoping technology-wise it will all be fine. So thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for all of you for turning in and for being interested in this topic. And we will start. Thank you also to Stefano for making it possible under the German presidency to start on time. That we will begin with an introductory statement from Mrs. Maeve Rutte. She is the Deputy Director General of DG GROW in the Brussels lingo, so DG Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. She just took over this position at the beginning of November. Previously, she was the Deputy Director General in the Commission's Joint Research Center and has already quite some experience working in the Commission, which she joined in 2005. And has been working there already on the topics of SMEs, competitiveness, and entrepreneurship. So she worked also as a director for biotechnologies, food and agriculture research, and as a resource director in DG Research and Innovation. Has quite an interesting background from the Estonian University of Life Sciences, but also from an MBA from the Danube University in Austria, and a Master in International Politics from Ceres in Belgium. So she's very widely sort of trained and well versed in the topic of well, the role of companies in this globalization. So without further ado, I would like to hand the floor to Mrs. Maeve Rutte for kicking us off with our debate here. And so Mrs. Rutte, the screen is yours.
Thank you a lot, and good morning from my side as well. Thank you for your generous introduction. I must say that it's indeed a pleasure to work in DG GROW, and in one of my previous, let's say, incarnations here in Brussels, I had the pleasure to work in what was called DG Enterprise, and from these times, I would like to recall a very very good conversations with one of our main speakers today, Mr. Kirchhoff, with whom I have pleasure to have worked also previously. So now coming to the event today, I would first like to say that thank you. Our chair today, our president, has here already laid out quite importantly what's going on in Europe, and certainly 2020 is not a year like any other. So this has been a very extraordinary year for all of us. And if we look at what this economic crisis has put on us, we really need to see how also at policy level we can address these issues. So you have certainly all noticed that in July our leaders came together to address this very unusual situation and crisis Europe is in, and the economic response that we put forward to address it, with more than 2.3 trillion euros to be mobilized, which about 1.8 trillion dedicated to recovery. This really is an unprecedented step to tackle the crisis. And of course, we want to not only recover, but we also want to transform our economies. And that is where the so-called twin transition comes to play. We talk about transition towards decarbonized, green economies. We talk about digitalization of economies. But importantly also, we think about how to strengthen our long-term resilience, our geopolitical strategic autonomy. These are important policy questions as well. So the green and digital transitions are really an extraordinary project if we think of the scale of it, and how these transitions are going to really transform and affect every part of our economies and societies. And for us, it means not only investing in climate neutral technologies and solutions, but also really building new business models, new skills, infrastructure that would be fit for future. And also as consumers, this very likely means that we have to change our own behavior. We do want modern European industries which can serve as essential source of economic growth and provide quality jobs. So in DG Grow, we are currently working on something we call ecosystems. And although the word comes more from the, let's say, the biology field, what we mean by it is that we're developing a concept whereby we look at the various industrial systems with really all the stakeholders which belong to this one. And we try to see also not only the big manufacturing companies, but really also the fabric of many small and medium-sized businesses that come to the same, let's say, the cluster or the ecosystem. We look at the research that goes into it, and we see how these interlinkages are important, how they are contributing to the common success or lack of it. And from this ecosystems lens, we are now developing a view more in depth into how these various parts of our economy are functioning. And this is a process which will feed into updating our current industrial strategy. You are certainly aware that we adopted a new strategy for European industries in March this year. But seeing really the heavy impact of the COVID crisis, and also seeing the need to accelerate our progress towards decarbonized and digitalized future, Commission has taken upon us the task to check how the progress is with the current industry policy and to actually update this one. And we aim at having the updated industry policy ready for adoption most likely March next year. So it's kind of a spring package that comes. And this is actually an essential element that in your discussions today, you may also want to reflect upon. The key elements are exactly decarbonization and digitalization, and how do we build our resilience. So the lessons we can learn from the COVID crisis and how this really impacts the way we also develop policies for our industries. So as you well know, last year EU has committed ourselves to the ambitious target of carbon neutrality by 2050. And this commitment at the heart of our Green Deal will also steer new long-term investments in the industrial ecosystems. And in its December this year conclusions, we expect that EU leaders are going to agree that 30% of the total expenditure from the recovery package would target climate-friendly projects like building renovation, clean energy technologies, low-carbon vehicles, to mention just few. So that is certainly the list is longer. And our revised industrial strategy will certainly take account of that. So we will be looking for ways of delivering on it. And I take this opportunity also to welcome your opinion of last week on industrial transition towards a green and digital European economy, which is very much in line with our ambition. Indeed, we need to make the most of this opportunity for European businesses to create new profitable business models. So it's not only about being compliant with our requirements, it's very much about really creating new business case. And we can see actually there are several areas where industrial competitiveness can meet our green climate ambitions. To mention a few, I mean, we talk about batteries, energy-intensive industries which need to face transition. We look for hydrogen, digital and space applications. So there are several, let's say, applications where we look into it. We also see that as we talk about the new industry strategy, this will be based on our current key assets, so to say, our single market, our internal market. And there the aims are to learn from what we have seen happening now during the COVID crisis. Certainly we don't want the single market to fragment, so we'll need to look for ways of keeping goods, keeping the good circulation going, keeping the all the values we currently have linked to the single market. We need to keep the integrity of it. And then similarly, when we think of the external elements of the single market, the trade elements, their Commission services are also working on reviewing the trade policy, where again, the interest is to make sure that we are not only having free trade agreements in place, but we do indeed also enforce them, that we make sure that they are delivering on what the intentions have been there. And these, of course, will progress hand in hand. And similarly, we will work on the climate targets, the minus 55% as the ambition now stands. And all of this has to be in very close link to the national recovery and resilience plans. So for all the people participating today, one of the messages really I think we would like to, or I would like to leave with you, is that as your national and regional governments are drawing up these plans, there needs to be a good reflection going in this direction. What are really the important investments in the future which need to happen now? And also to see how the private and public investments can be brought together. Another key element that will figure in the updates and in the overall look we have for our industries is, of course, the investments that Europe is making in research and development. And there you know that we have the Horizon Europe large-scale framework program coming up with investments ready for technology development, but also for innovative small businesses. And European Union is about to set up an innovative new program under the Horizon, namely Innovation Council, which will particularly look into startups and trying to accelerate the technology uptake, which is one of the areas where we are unfortunately not quite at the level of our competitors. As to the digitalization challenge, President Malia has already pointed out that this is indeed an area where Europe also needs to step up our work. Our good colleagues dealing with the telecom and all these digitalization issues are indeed in the final stretch to have the DSA and DMA documents adopted next week. But perhaps from my angle, I would like to also highlight that besides these documents, we have to very much think about the industrial aspect of things. So how is digitalization, robotization, automation going to impact the way how our industries are organized? Where will be the value created tomorrow? How much value will be actually coming perhaps from data-related services? And how can our industries become much more resource efficient when using all these new tools and these opportunities? And not to forget, of course, the ICT sector itself needs to go through the greening as well. And there are some estimations showing that if we look at all the ICT sector components, the greenhouse gas emissions from this sector are actually quite high. So it's not only the digitalization, but the greening and digitalization really need to go very much hand in hand. Digitalization helping other industries to decarbonize, and the ICT industry itself also decarbonizing as we go through the transitions. And the third element about the digitalization I wanted to particularly highlight is the question of recycling as well. We see that the per capita, let's say, waste that Europe is generating with all the laptops, iPads, whatever ICT tools we use is actually among the highest in the world. And a lot of good raw material is also wasted if these products are not recycled. So that's perhaps also an angle to keep in mind. How can we generate more recycling of these products in Europe? We have good examples also of public-private partnerships, which I would like to mention as one way of going ahead. You have taken certainly note of progress on the batteries, progress on the hydrogen, where we have announced new industrial alliances. And these alliances allow to really pool resources to generate new ways of working together. And this, I would say, is really one of the models we would like to promote also under the existing and the renewed industry policy, so that the efforts are put together to be future-proof, to be future-ready, to be fit for the decarbonized and digitalized future that we are facing. And for this work, I wish the discussions today really to go well, and I hope that your inputs, your opinions will nicely help us shape the future together. So good luck today, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ruther. Very interesting overview of the challenges and of the activities that you're planning on the European level. I would now like to give the floor to our first speaker for the first part of this little seminar, and that's Mr. Arndt Kirchhoff, the CEO and managing partner at Kirchhoff Holding GmbH. He's chairman of the advisory board of the Kirchhoff Group and holds a number of positions in the German Business Association field. So he's vice president of the Automobile Association, VDA, has quite some experience also in working at the BDI committee, and he's vice president also in the BDA, so the German Employers Organization. He is himself, obviously, an entrepreneur, runs his own company, so I'm actually pretty fascinated and in awe how he manages to deal with all those different challenges and how he manages his own agenda and time. So, Mr. Kirchhoff, I switch to German now.
Well, Mr. Kirchhoff, I'd like to ask you to speak of your experience. We've heard from the Commission that there are a lot of strategies, programs, alliances, all kinds of targets. And at the same time, we have the coronavirus. How do you cope with all of this? Is it all a bit much? How do you set your priorities? And what would you like to receive from politicians at the moment? I give you the screen, Mr. Kirchhoff.
Mr. Kirchhoff, please press speak.
Ja, herzlichen Dank, Frau Party.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Party. Ladies and gentlemen, the European economy and European industry face huge challenges. Our companies have been hit hard by the coronavirus at a time when a large sector of this industry has been in recession, and that's since 2018. At the same time, there is the challenge of making large investments in order to remain competitive in the long term. We face a huge task: digital transformation and moving towards climate neutrality, reducing greenhouse gases. Doing both at the same time is a herculean task. During the corona crisis, our politicians have reacted fast and taken a great number of measures to cushion us from the worst possible consequences. However, small and medium-sized companies have lost a great deal of capital, money that will now not be available for investments. We need to decarbonize. We need sustainable transition. A lot will depend on whether our continent as a whole can support our companies and help people to keep their jobs so that they all have a future. And I say very clearly that we need to remain a home for industry. Our prosperity depends to a large extent on that. The density of our industrial sector is extremely important. In the lockdown during this spring, many borders were closed, and we saw then how chains were broken and what the knock-on effect was on industry and on jobs. It happened immediately. Now, we still have functioning networks that provide the foundation for our economy and for jobs, but this is a time of change, and Corona makes the needs more acute. Things couldn't be more challenging in technical terms, in terms of time, in financial terms. These are challenges that we can only tackle together. Politics, business. We have to have a common goal. In this sustainable transition, we have three main tasks. First of all, the energy turnaround, the shift to renewable forms of energy. And then there is the hydrogen economy. For the energy transition, and this is a particularly major task for Germany, in 1 year, we need to phase out nuclear energy. And then, of course, we need to detach ourselves from coal. I don't think there is another industrial country in the world that has set such an ambitious goal for itself. And there are several questions here that we need to tackle at the same time. How do we, over the next 20 years, provide security of supply for business and households? How can we bring about a successful energy transition without pushing already expensive energy prices further up? And then we have to extend the network so that power from renewables reaches the places where it is needed. Connections north to south, east to west. And what about storage capacity? Will we be successful in making the energy transition a success in ecological terms? Because one thing is clear. We need to work on acceptance, the acceptance of the general public. Without that, we cannot be successful. So there aren't only challenges here in terms of the economy or industry. This is a societal issue. We have agreement on the need to move out of coal, move out of fossils. But what about the alternative to this? Because we've had demonstrations, people wanting to leave nuclear power and coal behind, and yet at the same time there have been demonstrations to block the building of new masts and connectors. This is a dangerous situation, and the key to success doesn't lie in more and more ambitious targets like the Green Deal or the goal to reduce by 55%. That isn't necessarily going to help. If the targets are unrealistic, they put industry off, and we have relocations in other parts of the world where standards are not so high. The solution is technological. We need to create the right framework conditions and set in motion industrial projects. And that brings me on to hydrogen. The necessary CO2 reductions on the way to climate neutral production will only be possible if we step up our use of hydrogen. Production, transport, and use of hydrogen must be seen as interconnected. We need a technological approach. When it comes to transition technologies, those too are absolutely key. Our goal must be, of course, green hydrogen. And we must achieve that by 2050. But in the medium term, we simply won't have enough green hydrogen. And if we don't use blue or turquoise hydrogen, if we don't use reformed gas or carbon capture storage hydrogen, then it won't be possible for us to set in motion the hydrogen economy in the near future. We need to think in terms of volumes rather than being too dogmatic. It has to be clear to us that a lot of the things that are possible in theoretical terms today are very difficult to put in place in industrial terms because of high installation and operating costs. And Then we need the regulatory framework conditions, perhaps the most difficult challenge. So many things are asynchronous in Europe. Germany has gone the furthest in terms of renewables. We've reached nearly 50%. That puts us at the top of the league. But there is the problem of extending the grid and the challenge of a smart grid to distribute this power. And when it comes to work on the grid, Germany is almost at the bottom of the league. So these two things are out of sync. We need digital networks. To use the technologies that we're discussing. So we need to work on the regulatory side of things. We need to create the preconditions for electrolysis units which can produce hydrogen. We need to look at steel production. Power will not be the answer there. There are other areas too. And on a cross-border basis, we have to look at the possibilities for transport, for pipelines. We need to work on that. And from the North Sea, from Belgium, from Holland, transport across the continent. We need partnerships too with other continents, with Africa, for example, in order to be able in future to import green hydrogen. And in all of these areas, we have to have an eye for digitization too. More efficient grids, better interconnection of production, transmission and utilization. There is a lot of potential to be exploited there, and this is something we're going to talk about in the second session. A sustainable transition requires a great deal of effort, changing our models, our preconditions. We have a great deal of competition globally. This transformation is a huge opportunity for us. And our starting position is basically not bad at all. But to take advantage of what we have, we need support for investments. We're talking about 50 billion. That has to be invested to support companies as they make their changes, to help to access new markets, so that we can create more interaction, better connectivity. Only that will make the change that we need possible, and the private sector will make the necessary investments. So we need to work shoulder to shoulder at the European level and at national level. Thank you very much, Mr. Kirchhoff, for those very interesting insights. You mentioned several major challenges and described them very well. I would now like to open up our discussion.
So we will now start with debate. You as members have the possibility to raise your hands, contribute your views. If you have any questions, also to Mr. Kirchhoff about sort of how he might want to influence the German government or any other sort of ideas and proposals you might have. Also contributions from your countries. What do you find are the most pressing challenges? So Yes, I already see a number of people raising their hands. So I would sort of ask the team here from the Secretariat to just follow the list. And then the first person I give the floor to is Georgi Stöv. So the screen is yours, please.
Thank you very much. I would like also to thank the speaker for this remarkable presentation, and at the same time to point out the importance of the sectors that he outlined. Starting from the transport and energy, all of them require a very drastic changes and a lot of investment in the infrastructure. As we all know, in the power sector, also in the transport, in order to have the change, we have to accommodate it to the new frameworks. And if we see now even the constructions of new roads and new power plants, most of them are designed, including the infrastructure for that, are designed for the fossil fuels. The existing also infrastructure prevents us to do what the speaker mentioned about the preserving and sending the energy to the areas where it's needed. And my question here is, to what extent we can rely on the new investment packages, especially in the recovery package, for new investment in the area of the renovating the infrastructure of the energy and transport, at least within the European Union. And do you believe that together with these new investments and the new jobs that will come after that, we can at least make the first steps towards the real decarbonization of European industry? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stöv. I think we basically just collect your input and your questions, and then at the end, hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes for Mr. Kirchhoff to also answer some of your points. So the next person on my list is Josep. The floor is yours.
Muy buenos días desde Madrid. Muchas gracias.
Good morning from Madrid. Thank you for this debate that you've organized. As a representative of the food industry, I wanted to raise two topics that are common to automobiles and other sectors, which are of great concern. As companies, we are ready and willing to come up with solutions that go beyond the legislation that is being drafted, not only in reducing energy use, but also when it comes to packaging. And I'll give you a very concrete example. PET plastic and aluminum tin cans, but particularly PET plastic, these are very problematic. And companies are taking initiatives that, I insist, are going above and beyond legislation when it comes to the reuse of materials. One of the leading companies which is PepsiCo, in Spain will now use 100% reusable PET with a very high cost. But all these companies do it because we understand that consumers, and particularly European consumers in the old continent, as we call it, want to be at the forefront when it comes to environmental issues. And we do this because our shareholders have responded positively in a complicated year such as this. Environmental and social topics are as important or even more than the limited economic results which are as a result of the pandemic. Now, what do we need? We need legislation to be clear, as the speaker was saying, and they need to be consistent. Because in this world that we live in, any legislator at the regional, national, or local level can tax or restrict. Often this is not documented more beyond press release without holding a dialogue with companies. So knowing that we are actually going above and beyond legislation, we really need to be on the same table when it comes to legislation. My second point is the loss of competitiveness. The farming sector has seen strategies such as the farm to fork, which are well-intentioned, but this can lead to a decrease in competitiveness in Europe. There was a study published last week that placed us really outside the market. So we need to have homogeneous rules, and we need to not lose competitiveness in an absurd way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this contribution. And indeed, I think it's really important to make sure that we actually show the good examples that are out there, and not only keep bashing sectors or companies in general, but also demonstrate that there's quite a lot of activity already going on in the industry and in the field. So the next speaker, just to kindly ask you to try and not be too long, so that as many speakers as are interested actually get the floor. So the next one is Gintaras Marquez. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my points are on globalization, which in the context of today's webinar. It is evident today that the EU proves being a frontrunner in climate ambition, and already plays a key role in boosting the global ambition. I have in mind that the US, Japan, even China today already are trying to set their own green objections. But to use its full potential and create concrete benefits to our companies, economies, and citizens, the EU has to prove also being an economic frontrunner. It is equally important. For this to happen, the European Commission, I think, must move to Green Deal practical implementation in a way that is economically effective and making a real driver for growth. Talking about 2030 objectives and alignment with economic growth objectives, the important assessments show that there are very little additional economic growth, and therefore the EU urgently needs a strong business plan, focus on making the Green Deal in a real engine for growth, maintaining Europe's competitiveness and avoiding carbon leakage to other parts of the world. And we need to see a much stronger focus on the EU competitiveness and to continue pushing for global level playing field. And in this regard, what we are strongly supporting, that is carbon border adjustment mechanism that should charge imports the same carbon price as the EU producers are paying under the emission trade system. So most of industries believe that the reduction of global asymmetries should minimize the risk of carbon and investment leakage outside the EU. And therefore, I'd like to also ask our guest speaker his attitude towards this measure, this mechanism that could make a level playing field in a global competitiveness for European industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Quinteras. Indeed, carbon leakage and the carbon border adjustment mechanism, whatever it's going to be, is probably going to be very high up on the agenda also next year. So the next speaker I have is Paul Rübig. The screen is yours.
Mr. Rübig, please press speak.
So technology seems to not be our friend there. Then we move on to the next speaker, Mr. August Mesker. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. You can hear me? Okay. First of all, I want to compliment Mr. Kirchhoff with what he said, because I think, completely agree with everything he said. And he did so in a very constructive way. And not only the content of what we're saying, I agree, but also the way he presents it and his plea for cooperation and constructive dialogue. Secondly, I want to shortly address the concept of recycling that Mrs. Rute mentioned. I think we should look at it from a broad perspective, not only recycling, but it starts with the lifetime of products that should be enhanced and expanded. And secondly, only if lifetime is optimized, we talk about recycling. But first also we talk about repair, which expands lifetime as well. And at the end of the road, we have to be sensible in when we dispose of products, and we should consider the waste that we produce, in fact, as new raw materials. And to achieve this, we need, in fact, design of products and services, in fact, based on the principle of sustainability requirements. And to obtain that, I think that we need indeed in-depth dialogues between government, industry, and civil society to determine what every industry needs to become sustainable. It varies from sector by sector, and we have to go and to have these dialogues in depth with every sector. And my plea is also to include also civil society and NGOs, also environmental NGOs in this dialogue, because when they are part and are invited to think about solutions, it will enhance their knowledge, their expertise, and their understanding of what is possible and what is economically feasible. So I support also the plea of Mr. Kirchhoff that we engage in dialogues to find efficient solutions for our challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now have 6 more people on my speakers list and time is running, so I will close the speakers list now, so please do not try and sort of add yourself to it. I will try and give the floor again to Paul Rübig now.
Yes, thank you so much. Hopefully it works now. Wonderful. First of all, I want to thank Rute Maive for being active now in this DG Growth, because I think it's very important to have now DG Growth active, and as SME in WOI, she knows exactly how important this area is. And we should look to the Sustainable Development Goals as an investment opportunity, because number 2 is food and feed production, number 6 is water and sewage, number 7 is renewable energy. And in all these 3 areas, the question of decarbonization is a very important one. If you see number 2 in growing forest, you can have a very good effect. In number 6, in sewage mining, you can get out a lot of CO2 and produce green gas. And in number 7, renewable energy, of course, we have to look to the storage of energy. And I like very much what Mr. Kirchhoff had said, that it's not only the framework of infrastructure, which is very important, I think it's also clear that the storage of energy should be a top priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rübig. The next one on my list is Maurizio Reale. The screen is yours.
Grazie.
Thank you, and congratulations on this very interesting initiative. The speakers before us had to, spoke about very significant topics, especially I'm referring to my colleague Buchem, who has already shared some ideas. I represent the farming and food sector. I share the point of view of Dr. Ruth, where she speaks of a green digital transition as an extraordinary project that means acquiring new skills and new infrastructure. I fully agree. This means, of course, changing our habits. And we need to show true resilience in order to achieve this. We also need to seize positive opportunities without alienating our own identity. There is a topic that is close to my heart, which is decarbonization. Farming companies have been working on this topic for years, and we're trying to improve the quality of life of farmers in the interest of citizens. But we also need to pay attention to our trade policies. And we need to pay attention to that now, especially because the measures that we want to take up should be accompanied by measures that also cover this sector. And in order to be efficient, we need to see what leads to positive outcomes. So we need to evaluate a carbon adjustment system at the border, keeping in mind what the realities are in other countries and their punitive measures are. So penalizing those that do not meet EU standards, or those that produce using systems that pollute. So we need a proper policy which can also help guarantee direct and positive contact with citizens. And this can be done through a real traceability in order to have a greater transparency on safety and quality. I'd like to ask the rapporteurs to please pay attention to what I'm saying, because this is the only way we will have efficient results if we consider agriculture and food as strategic sectors, even when it comes to digitalization, as we'll speak about later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have 4 more people on my list, so if you could please try and be short so that Mr. Kirchhoff also has the opportunity to come back at the end. So the next one is Stefan Bach. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I am speaking on behalf of the transport sector, and I feel this is a very important seminar because you can see that the Green Deal, which means that we will have growth, we have sustainability, is one part where also digitalization is very important. The coronavirus has shown us the importance of the transport system for European welfare and growth. Freight transport has functioned rather well. Passenger transport, because of lacking of demand, is in some cases the aviation, for instance, almost at the brink of being eradicated. And it shows that it's necessary when we start to open up and rebuild that we really take care of what is important for the growth of the European Union. And then I think one point is, it was mentioned by my colleague earlier, Mr. Stoyev, the transport sector infrastructure in the future, when we start now to invest again, to rebuild, we should really see that the link between the concrete or steel infrastructure, the ITS, the digitalization infrastructure, and the renewable energy and electrification side of infrastructure should be linked together, so we create something that is sustainable for the future and still can cope with the necessary development of transport demand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next one I have on my list is Alberto Macchiori.
Grazie.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody because today's meeting is very interesting. As architect and urban planning specialist, I can simply agree that all of these environmental topics must have cities on board, because cities are the places where social and productive life takes place in our countries. For example, when we think about the new hydrogen cars, urban forestation, which is a worldwide effort, but it's incentivated at the local level. The use of public transport. These are all topics that are all linked, because if we're talking about the social angle, city mayors must be main stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have two more people on my list. One, of course, is Stefano. I would maybe ask you to just be the last one so that you can wrap up, and maybe also point out again what you think are the most relevant sort of takeaways from this exchange. So the next one I would like to give the floor to then is Michael Pinter. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Speaking of decarbonization, I would like to highlight that this is really an important week. As we know, the European leaders, the heads of state and government, will make a decision later this week on the EU's 2030 climate target. Following a proposal by the European Commission, the 2030 target shall be increased from currently minus 40% greenhouse gas emissions to minus 55% in order to meet the climate neutrality objective by 2050. This comes while Europe is facing unprecedented challenges of the global merit and in context of the COVID-19 crisis. The new target will have severe implications for several industrial sectors, as well as for the overall energy system. I'm representing the steel industry, and we know that the minus 55% target would entail severe shocks to some of the industries. When I look at the Commission's impact assessment, it implied clearly that in case of minus 55 target, additional investments in the energy system of 90 billion per year will be needed, on top of 336 billion needed to reach the current 40% target. So we are speaking about enormous money. I think if we want to deliver, there is only one way, and that is to accompany climate targets with effective safeguard measures for industry. And this has been already mentioned by several speakers, so I will sum up very shortly. We need carbon leakage protection via free allowances in the EU ETS trading system for energy-intensive sectors to be continued towards 2030 and beyond. When a carbon border adjustment mechanism is introduced, this must be complementary to continuous carbon leakage protection via free allocation and indirect cost compensation within the EU, within the existing EU ETS. Industry will also need additional investment support from public sources to stem the transformation that the 55% target would entail. Whether it's through important projects of common European interest or clean partnership, or where applicable through the Just Transition Fund or Modernization Fund, or through the ETS Innovation Fund. Also, a large portion of the new EU recovery and resilience facilities should be earmarked specifically for industrial decarbonization and transformation projects. Ultimately, to sum up, only if the triangle of the climate action, competitiveness, and security of supply of energy and critical resources is set in a balanced manner, Europe will be able to fulfill its goals and ensure prosperous businesses and industries leading this transition. Thank you for the floor, or better to say, thank you for the screen, Mrs. Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Interesting points there too. So last but not least at all, a pride of place now for Stefano. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you to everyone for the interventions. I have two quick remarks and maybe a question as well. To Ms. Rutte, thank you very much for, I think, placing in a very succinct manner the work that is being undertaken by the Commission in this area, which is very important for us. It's also very important that persons like you, officials like you, do interact with the Employers Group. And in fact, you made reference to a recent opinion that the EESC has produced, which was related to industrial transition towards a green and digital economy. And I must highlight to you, Ms. Rutte, that this is an opinion with which we as a group had serious difficulties with. In fact, we proposed a number of amendments which were not carried in terms of majority, but there was enough votes in favor for them to be carried as an annex to the opinion. But what I would like to say more than that is that I would be keen that if we as a group can engage with you in not too far away stage, and maybe in the first weeks of January, so that we can also put forward our views and points as to why we are not fully in accordance with that particular opinion. To Mr. Kirchhoff, thank you very much. I think you have really laid out, and again in a very simple way and clear way, the difficulties or the complexity, rather than difficulties, the complexity of the challenges ahead. This is the reason also why I'm always keen to have people, speakers, participants who are coming actually from the field, who are dealing with their particular sector or industry in a day-to-day manner, because you have very clearly and crystal clear presentation of what the situation and the challenges are. However, my question to you in terms of the car industry is that it is clear that the car industry has been already working very hard on reducing emissions at what is referred to as the tailpipe end of the situation, i.e. emissions which come from the tailpipe. However, I read a recent McKinsey report, which was published in September of this year, and they reckon that there could be considerable reduction of emissions also from the materials production in the car industry. And therefore, my question to you is how confident or how comfortable are you that the car industry is also looking into this particular area as an area for significant potential reduction of emissions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano. So I would like to give the floor back to Arndt Kirchhoff. Then before there's I sort of noted down four questions. I don't know, maybe you have more issues you would like to come back to, but we don't have a lot of time. So if you could try and do this very quickly within, let's say, 4 to 5 minutes. I noted the question on infrastructure deployment and why it's so difficult. Then also the involvement of NGOs. Maybe you have some experience in actually exchanging with NGOs on your policies and activities. And then carbon leakage came up a couple of times. And then lastly, of course, Stefano's question on the emission reduction in the automotive sector. So, Mr. Kirchhoff, again, the screen is yours.
Ja, herzlich.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Patti. And thank you to everybody for the comments and questions. I'll try to work through the list as quickly as possible. I think that the recovery programme is key, and the money needs to be used for the right purposes. We talked about the steel industry, aluminium. We have to bring down CO2 emissions, and that's not possible using electricity. Hydrogen is the only answer. So we need to speed up. It's difficult, the infrastructure, because of the volatility of hydrogen and the danger of fire, the soil. For metal raw materials, we desperately need hydrogen. We need to counter the disadvantages. Markets, practical implementation, that's the big question. Synchronization, you're right, only if we're successful here will we have an export model. Will we be able to export our processes? If we don't manage that, the opposite will happen. And I see this happening in Germany with the high energy prices. Companies investing in Germany are investing elsewhere. The processes are bringing about exactly the opposite of what we want. Mr. Rubig, wastewater, that can be used to produce hydrogen. It's an excellent process. And when we've done that, we need to work on transport, we need to work on storage. I talked about volatility. Recycling, the circular economy, that's a major challenge. At the moment, our footprint is 2 or 3 times what we have on the planet. We need to change that. We need to use fewer resources, virgin materials. We need to recycle. We have a lot of potential. The average now is about 10%. There are some good examples. Steel, over 60%, where we gather in the waste. So yes, the circular economy, that has to be a point for our attention. Agriculture. Digitization is a big opportunity here, as is biogas and their conversion into hydrogen. That's an important path that's already being investigated and tried out. The transport sector. Transport, vehicles, lorries are responsible for half of emissions. Very difficult for them to be powered by electricity. Hydrogen and fuel cells, those are the solutions for long distance trucks. So the hydrogen economy. Heavy lorries, once again, that brings us back to infrastructure and the need for smart infrastructure. Ms. Mr. Macchioni, as an architect and an urban planner, there's a lot to do. Mobility, there we need more electricity, combination with digitization to reduce congestion and expand public transport. When we can produce electricity with fuel cells and hydrogen and store it, we will be less and less dependent. That's a big subject for urban planners today. Mr. Pinter, in 9 years, we want to have achieved the 55% goal. So we really need to accelerate. And that means looking at hydrogen. I talked about blue and turquoise hydrogen as an intermediate stage. We need electrolyzers, huge plants. They take 5 years to build. And you know how long the planning process takes. I don't think we'll achieve it by 2030. Our only opportunity is gas, converting gas, reformation. That can be achieved fast, and it's an important step, even if it's only an intermediate step, to make steel and other materials greener. Mr. Maria, thank you very much for your praise. The car industry, well, the main feedstocks, steel, aluminium, so a heavy burden in terms of CO2. We need to move away from that to green hydrogen. Thank you.
Danke, Herr Kirchhoff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kirchhoff. Thank you very much to everybody who contributed to a very interesting discussion. My conclusion is that we need to invest in something that's going to give us hydrogen. It looks as if that is the sector of the future. We don't have Mrs. Rutte with us anymore. We've lost her, but there will certainly be follow-up. We'll pass on our conclusions to the Commission. Now, we're a little bit behind schedule. I'd like to apologize for that. So we're going to move straight on to the next session, the next panel. And the subject here is digitalization and globalization. And we have with us the head of the Department for Digitalization and Innovation at the BDI, the Federation of German Industries, Mr. Thomas Kernen. And he has headed up that department since 2017. He works on cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, the data economy, IT infrastructure, social acceptance of digitalization, and research and development. He's been a member of the managing board of eConsents, a forum on sustainable development, and he has been in that position since 2011. He's a lawyer by training. He's worked for the German supervisory authorities. He has a postgrad in sustainable business from Cambridge University and has also lectured at the Institute for Corporate Responsibility Management. Mr. Kernen, our subject now is digitalization and globalization. I would like to give you the floor, to give you the screen for your input. Go ahead, please.
So, thank you very much. Can you hear and see me? Excellent. So, thank you very much for the invitation to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and hello. My name is Tom Kuehn. I was presented very extensively here. Right now, for the last 3.5 years, I've been dealing very much with digitalization and innovation topics. And you just mentioned that you would have to invest your money in hydrogen issues. I would also recommend you to invest your money in digitization, in digitized technologies, because there's a lot of things happening there that are very positively looking. I was asked to talk about 15 minutes to you on the issue of digitization, and I want to do this looking at it from 3 angles. I want to give you a brief perspective on what's happening in Germany, as we have the German presidency, of course, right now until the end of this year. Then I would like to give you a view of how German industry views the EU right now and what is happening in the EU concerning digitization. And I want to focus then in the end on the role of the EU in the global arena, because there's, of course, as you know, a lot of things happening there, and also taking all of the 3 into account when it comes to Corona and its effects. So let's start with a brief outlook on Germany and what Germany is doing on digitization and how things are going on there. So if we look at the perspective of the German people, so not on companies or the state, but starting at people, Germans are ambiguous, I would call it. Germans are I would consider Germany as an innovative country, of course. So innovation is not something that is far from our thinking, but still Germans are very, very reluctant in giving out their personal data. There's a great fear in the German people of their personal data being misused, which is difficult at sometimes for new business models to evolve in Germany. And at the same time, as I said, it is ambiguous. There has been a strong and very, very heated debate on the Corona warning app. I guess in many other countries out there, you have similar apps. There are about 20 million people who downloaded the German Corona app right now so far, which seems to be a lot, but with 82 million inhabitants, that's just 1/4, one would say. And there have been serious debates on this app. And the fun thing about it is that most of these debates were happening on Facebook and Twitter, which of course are much more difficult when it comes to data issues. So it's a little bit ambiguous in Germany when it comes to people. When we look at German companies, they have been really dealing with connection problems in the last years. This has become better and better now. And what we see now is a large-scale rollout of 5G, and I assume this is happening in many of your countries as well at this point in time. But the connectivity issue is not at the forefront of problems of German companies. The main problem right now is data. So many companies, of course, are very far already. They know what their data is and they know how to use it. But we have a large number of companies who still don't exactly know what data they actually have or how they can retrieve it via sensors and others. So the whole issue has different kinds of speeds within German companies. And of course, the German Mittelstand, the famous one, is in the midst of the discussions there. There are Mittelstand companies which are really, really advanced and some others which are lagging behind. And the second question that almost every European company, I would say, is posing itself, am I allowed to use the data that I do have in my company? And that is not an easy question. The question is difficult because of GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, because no company can be 100% sure where the line can be drawn between personal data and machine data. And that is a thing that the EU and all the national governments need to resolve very quickly to bring clarity into this discussion for companies to actually innovate with the data that they have. From the perspective of German companies, of course, a lot of challenges right now ahead. We are talking about greening the economy. We were talking about that earlier on, digitization, and of course, fastly disrupting markets and more difficult political changes worldwide. You were talking about the automotive company, which is very important for German industry still, with approximately 5 million jobs on the line here every day. So automotive is essential for German industry to survive all these crises that we have. The German state, if we want to look at that, has not been doing enough in Germany in terms of digitization. that might be due to the fact that we have a difficult federal system with 16 federal states, but we do have a strong commitment now by the government on data strategy, on AI, on blockchain, and so forth. And we see that there's a lot positively happening on the government level. Corona had a positive effect, I have to say, on the German digitization as such. Of course, as in many other countries, there has been a boost in home office acceptance, but also on top of that, German people are more and more starting to accept digitization, especially also when it comes to health apps and so forth. So I would say overall that Corona actually brought a positive stimulus to Germany and how Germany perceives digitization. When it comes now to the second perspective, to the question of how Germany and how German industries use the EU, of course, the EU is strong because of different cultures out there, but it is also strong because of the single market aspect. And we have not seen so far a digital single market. We are on the road to achieve it, but it's still difficult at many points. And Brexit, of course, is not helping with that. The good thing is that the new Commission under Mrs. von der Leyen now has a clear digital strategy on where it wants to go. It has a data strategy, and it comes out with new legislation now every single month, one has the feeling, which tries to resolve those problems and those challenges. I would say that overall, the essential thing for the EU to happen from the perspective of Germany is to find the right balance. The right balance between the challenging aspects of the Green Deal, which you already talked about, of recovery on the other hand, and of course on investing in future-oriented technologies and in digitization, and to do all that at the same time. I think that is extremely and tremendously difficult for the Commission to do that, because the balance needs to be found. Otherwise, companies will suffer or just lose the game because the challenges were too great there. I would say that looking at the German presidency, of course, there were big expectations on the German presidency. The first month of the presidency was reserved for the Brexit negotiations. As you all know, they are still going on, and we're keeping fingers crossed that something will come out of that. But of course, Corona really shook things up very much so. And all the aspects on innovation and digitization that the German presidency really wanted to push forwards, were put to the side a little bit by Corona. So overall, Corona on the digitization aspect within the EU rather has a negative effect so far. But we hope, of course, to be able to get out of that very quickly. Now, if we look at the big picture now, the role of the EU in the global arena, we have to start before Corona, and we have to look at the big players that we have there, the US, of course, and China. And what we've seen before even Corona there were strong tendencies of protectionism behavior, especially by the US, of course, and by the government there, which was followed then by Chinese reactions. And what we've seen is a retreat of those two nations from the global systems, from WTO and from others. And if you look, I can only recommend you to do that. If you look at the new 5-year plan that is being drawn up right now in China, and you look at the aspect of dual circulation economy, that is the big term that China is looking into, dual circulation economy. It clearly emphasizes that China is pulling back on the one hand from international aspects, really focusing on its own market, trying to be as independent also in terms of technologies, chips, software, and so much, as independent as it can, and making others dependent upon Chinese technologies as much as it can. That is a clear strategy that is being followed, of course, very much so by the Communist Party. And on top of that, China is trying something which is important to all of us, I think. It's trying to put a lot of focus on standards. on environmental standards, on digitized standards, on standards in all kinds of economic spheres, trying to put their finger on the standardization issue might be the most impressive thing that they are trying to do, because they would be able to dominate markets whenever they dominate the standards. And that is something that, of course, we believe in Germany we have to look at, and we don't have to fight it, but we have to be a strong counterpart, I think. So what we've seen coming out of those protectionists tendencies, even before Corona, is something that has developed more and more from a trade war into a techno-political war. What we've seen now is that the US and China are trying to achieve technological dominance in all kinds of spheres. In China, you have China Made in 2025, which is a clear strategy focusing on AI and on other technologies. And this techno-political war brings the danger with it that Europe, as a very strong market participant, of course, will be marginalized. So the big challenge, I think, for the EU, for Europe in the future to come, will not be to separate itself, to be protectionist against those two other big markets. It will be to, at the same time, stay open for free trade and free exchange of goods and services, but at the same time develop a strong own stand on technologies. And you can only do that if you invest in digitization and in innovation. And that brings us to the big term of digital sovereignty. That is a term that you've all heard in the newspapers of your countries, of course. Digital sovereignty is being discussed, and there is no real definition for it. There are terms like autarky or resilience or self-relying or independence that come with it. From our perspective, digital sovereignty can never mean to retreat from the others. It must mean stay open-minded, stay open to world trade, and stay open to the WTO system, for example. But it also means to put up a strong own stand on 5 aspects. And those are, from our perspective, the most essential, the crucial aspects about digital sovereignty of the EU on the global arena. And those 5 are infrastructure, cybersecurity, cloud, the key enabling technologies, and data. Let me just point out 1 or 2 things on those 5, and then I will end for this discussion to open up. So when you look at the digital sovereignty aspect of infrastructure, I think, of course, the rollout of 4G is a thing that we all know needs to happen. 5G is advancing very quickly, and as we do have 2 very big telecom providers with Ericsson and Nokia in Europe, we do have a good standing when it comes to digital infrastructure and telecommunications, but we also need to understand that 5G is not the end of technological debate. It will just be one step followed by the other, and the next one will be 6G, of course, which will be much more data transported via the lines. And it is absolutely positive to see that the EU Commission now also concentrates some of its money on 6G innovation. And we need to really try to get into the 6G development very quickly to be part of the of spearheading that technological development. When it comes to cybersecurity, just to give you one number, in Germany alone, about 103 billion euros of damage annually for German companies. 103 billion. That is some money that you could actually spend much better if you would invest it on innovation. But this is the damage being done every year. And of course, this is rising. So what needs to be done on the European level is focusing, and we're doing that over the Cybersecurity Act already, on hardware and on software security. It's not about forbidding single companies. That is a discussion very much associated with the name of Huawei, of course, as you know. It's not about forbidding specific names or companies. It is about coming up with clear rules and regulations that then apply to all players on the market, also including Huawei and others. And for those who abide to those laws and regulations, they are free to bring in their technologies. And for those who not, they should of course be ruled out of the game. So the third aspect of digital sovereignty in Europe will be cloud, and it is already cloud. And as you all know, the cloud services from Amazon and Google and Alibaba, of course, are very, very dominant worldwide. And one name has been going up and down the news lately, and that is the name of Gaia X, the general artificial intelligence architecture, an idea that was brought up by France and by Germany, but which tries to include very quickly now countries like your countries. And we strongly believe, German industry strongly believes in this idea. And just one thing that is important, this is not a new hyperscaler. We're not trying to bring about a new AWS or a new Google cloud system. It is a set of regulations, rules, and standards, basically, that makes very clear how cloud services are allowed to act here on the EU territory. And I think that is an idea that was missing for much too long time. And we are very much putting our finger on that and trying to bring this forward. And as you all might have heard, Mrs. von der Leyen stressed Gaia X as an integral part of digital strategy of the EU, and we welcome that very much. The fourth aspect of digital sovereignty, of course, are the key enabling technologies. And those are, of course, material and nanotech, life science, microelectronics, photonics. And it's very positive that the EU Commission added AI and cybersecurity and connectivity issues to this list of cats of key enabling technologies. And we see great future if we combine the innovative power of the 27 European countries regarding those technologies. Of course, Horizon Europe, the big innovation research program, now has been almost passed with 85 billion euros on being invested by the EU on innovation, which is a good signal. It's not the signal we expected or we wanted with 120 billion, which we wished for, but at least 85 billion within the midst of a corona crisis is something we need to address positively, I think. So last but not least, data. You all have heard, and many of you have suffered from GDPR, of course, but in the end, I strongly believe that GDPR has under the line positive effects. You all have heard that there are strong problems concerning the privacy shield. So the question of how data can be transmitted to the US and vice versa. Those are the aspects of free flow of data that we need to address quickly for for European countries, companies that do business with the US. And one thing that I want to stress in the end very much, which is important to us in Germany, and I hope to you too, it's the platform regulation. When we talk about platforms, we talk about GAFA, we talk about Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, we talk about the big non-European platforms all the time, which is of course relevant, but those are B2C platforms we talk about. The strength that we have in Europe are not B2C platforms. We do have some, but this is not our intrinsic strength. Our strength are B2B platforms. And we see a lot of them evolving right now, and they do have totally different characteristics compared to B2C platforms. And the danger that we see now within the EU on this specific aspect of the digital sovereignty is that regulation now is going to cut down the new positive aspects of B2B platforms that are flourishing right now, at least in Germany and other countries. So we are trying to convince the EU Commission now that B2C platforms are, if they are being regulated, should not include B2B platforms, because that is a real stronghold that we can build up within the EU now. Our strength is industry in Europe. That is something that the US is not strong anymore in. So we need to foster industry data. We need to foster B2B platforms. And in Germany, we're ready to do this, very strongly aligned with all of your countries. So in the end, I'm finishing now. Corona has an effect, of course, on all this global arena, but it only catalyzes the aspects that have already been there. So we need to find a strong European stand on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koenen, for this very comprehensive sort of view on the challenges that we are facing in the digital arena. So again, we have about 15 minutes or so, not very much. So I would like to, of course, offer you the opportunity to the members to contribute to the debate, but also try and keep it short. And I would kind of like to encourage the ladies to also try and contribute. Not that I would want to discourage the gentlemen, but would be nice to also try and see if we have some women that are active in this sector. But then the first one already on my list, and please try and keep it short, is Maurizio Reale.
Grazie.
Thank you, Sandra. I'd like to thank Thomas Koenen for your excellent participation. I'll be very brief. The idea of investing in digital innovation is not a new idea in order to reduce the environmental impact, of course. In my sector, agriculture, this means fewer pesticides, decreased use of water, and a better use of resources. There is a topic that has been very well dealt with by Dr. Koenen, which I think deserves the utmost attention, which is safety. I think this is essential. We need to promote the rights of farmers to have their data protected and their privacy protected. So from that point of view, we need to safeguard those rights. And I'll conclude by saying that we need to make these technologies flow down also to small producers. There's a company in Italy, Fradesi, that does this, and it does it very well. And I'm at your disposal if you'd like to hear more details. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you very much also for adhering to my request for making it short. The next one is Alberto Macchiori.
Grazie.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Dr. Koenen. I agree with much of what he has said. Just something I wanted to add. COVID has led to a change in lifestyle and an increase towards the digitalization and the required infrastructures. This will not be a passing fad because working from home which has been the norm during this period, will remain as a paradigm shift. And it will also affect cities. There will be somewhat of a depopulation of metropolises to medium and smaller sized cities. And so infrastructure cannot ignore this phenomenon. So member states, in particular Italy, my country, will have to quickly catch up because this modus operandi will continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next one is Pietro Francesco De Lotto.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Dr. Koenen for his brilliant speech. Just a few topics. I'd like to stress the idea of digitalization as a tool, as well as cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. These are all the key aspects. The Commission has an opportunity to become a leader, or at least be in the club of the global leaders in these topics. I think this is crucial. I'd like to ask Dr. Koenen, what do you think about the risk of fragmentation? We see this increasing every day, especially when we move on to further technologies such as 6G. And the risk is that a great amount of capital that are available for the development of our continent might be done not at the national level, but as you mentioned, it could be fragmented at the regional level, which might create unequal distribution of infrastructures. And something else I wanted to raise, should we not perhaps think of a common pan-European infrastructure? Perhaps the time has come for that when it comes to the digital agenda. And finally, the topic of skills. If we think about workers, but also entrepreneurs, and the 23 million SMEs, small and medium entrepreneurs, the idea of digital skills is vital. So thank you once again for your very enlightening words, and I'm awaiting your response. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you also for mentioning the skills. That's something that I thought as well of, that the talent that we need for actually advancing this digitization on the European continent is also very, very crucial. And without it, we will not get anywhere. Thank you for also following up on my little request. Antje Gerstein, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra. If you request, I follow immediately, as you can see. Vielen Dank, Thomas Köhn.
Thank you very much, Thomas Köhn, for that very interesting input. Now, I'm speaking from the point of view of the retail trade, and I'd like to mention a couple of points that are important to us with respect to the Digital Services Act. I think these are important points for the upcoming debate. Obviously, we are a little bit nervous that we might get something as detailed as the Privacy Directive. And we're wondering, and this is of course B2C, we're wondering to what extent we need to identify our users. What possibilities do we have to offer so that we can be used legally, and how detailed a way do we need to react when we've received feedback? We can see there are going to be challenges. We need to make sure that the hurdles aren't too high so that smaller platforms can stay in business. I think it's really important that we find an equilibrium between fair conditions for competition and the avoidance of restrictions that are too great for small platforms. And then something that's important for B2B and B2C, and this is a major issue. What about suppliers, platforms from third countries when it comes to product standards and things like that? How can we have more control about deliveries from third countries, the customs aspects? These things are important to us. We don't want too big a wedge between B2B and B2C because there are issues that are cross-cutting. Thank you. Thank you, Antje. Yes, third-party suppliers, that's a very important subject.
Komorowski.
Mr. Komorowski, your microphone is open.
While technology fails us a little bit, we take the next speaker, which is Laurencio Placiano.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Herculean, for an excellent presentation. I entirely agree with you, speaking not about the trade wars, but about the techno-political wars. And I'm asking you, where should you add or insert the medical dimension of this war? And the second topic is in the garden of the cybersecurity topics. And I have been surprised that you have not mentioned at all the influences generated by our eastern great neighborhood, which has been very much fingerprinted the final elections on Brexit recently and create some damages, politically speaking. Can we have your consideration on this regard also, please? And thank you very much in advance.
Thank you. And now Mr. Komorowski.
Okay, I hope you can hear me right now. As Antje, I'm coming from the retail services industry as well. And as Mr. Koenen mentioned, there are a number of industries, including the digital ones, are booming. However, there are some other industries like tourism, catering, air industry, etc., are just suffering. And of course, these are challenges we have to tackle. I was happy that Mr. Koenen mentioned the Gaia X and the CSJ issues. I believe that the Gaia X mainly right now is a French and German undertaking. I believe that all Europe should be better involved. We here in the EESC are fighting and working for that. And the third point that he mentioned, and I like very much the Chinese initiative about the circulation economy. I believe that despite the large number of population, China won't be able to win or to be a winner just to depend on itself. So indeed, the globalization during the circumstances of pandemics is very important, and it's a challenge of us in front of us, but we are able and have to tackle. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I have the last speaker now, before I give the floor again to Mr. Koenen to come back to some of the questions made. So the screen is yours, Maria, and thank you also for raising your voice here.
Thanks a lot. I was challenged by the requests of more women to speak. I want to give you a short input from Bulgaria. Just recently, the National Economic and Social Council adopted a series of opinions on the challenges and opportunities related to digitalization and its impact on businesses, world of work, and also consumers. And you wouldn't be surprised that when we talk about businesses, the challenges described by Mr. Koenen were pretty much the same. And what I could add as identified challenge is also the aspect related to the educational structure and the need to adapt the curricula so we could have a well-prepared workforce that would be needed for the labor market. And I take the opportunity to thank both presenters, first one related to the Green Deal and this one to digitalization, and I find it very useful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, very kind of you. So I give the floor now back to Mr. Koenen to maybe if you could answer to some of the questions. We don't have a lot of time, so if you could try and make it 2 or 3 minutes maximum, that would be very nice.
All right. I hope you can hear me. All right. Thank you very much for the questions. There is not enough time. We could, argue and discuss for hours now, I think. Let me just come back to a couple of things. So the first question went into the direction of SMEs and how important it is to take them along, because they are the backbone of European economy, of course. And I can only underline how true that is, of course. And that is a challenge both in Germany and in the whole of the EU, because it really depends on the company itself to be willing and to be open to go along with those changes. But I think that we do see very, very positive tendencies right now. And it is, of course, also on the mind of the EU Commission right now that the SMEs need to be addressed very much so when it comes to AI, blockchain, and other data-related questions. And that is something that we, of course, as the BDI, have very much in our focus here. The next question or point was about the population, of course. Yes, we've seen that. Corona led to the fact that the people, of course, were working from home, which means not from the center of the cities, which means that we will see in the future to come the workforce being spread out much more in the different countries. And that, of course, is only possible on the long run if connectivity is there. So connectivity basically is the basis for all of digitization that we talk about, and that needs to be pushed very much so. Someone else also questioned, shouldn't there be a pan-European infrastructure? Yes, there needs to be two kinds of infrastructures. One is on fiber, glass fiber, of course, and the other one is about mobile. And there we could splendidly discuss about harmonizing the frequency auctioning very much more than we've seen so far, because the auctioning, as you know, has been happening in all 27 countries separately. And I think that the EU could align that much more in the future to come to bring up speed on the European level. Skills, another aspect, of course, very much so. I think what we see in China now is quantity. I think what we're still very good at in Europe is qualitative education and skills. I think we need to convince people all over Europe that achieving those skills is not anymore a question of school and university, but it is much more a thing that will be a lifelong issue, because things are developing and going onwards so much faster than before. Gaia X, very important aspect I don't want to forget, is not meant to be a French-German project. It was, of course, initiated by those two countries, but it is clearly meant to be a pan-European project, and we would welcome it very much so if this was a thing that all 27 countries would actively take part in, because only then the full strength of such a regulatory and standardization system will come into force. China, again, the market is a huge market. I don't know if you know the numbers, but the Chinese population is about 1.392 billion people. And if you look at this number, this is more than all African countries altogether. The country China has more inhabitants than all African countries combined. That shows you the strength of that single market, which is regulated very centralistically. And of course, they are pulling force from that fact that they have a huge market that they can scale up things in. Last issue, and then I will end, fragmentation. Someone else put that word on the board here. I think what we will see, but the big picture in the future to come, is a battle between three techno-political systems. We will see a very liberal system coming from the US. We will see a very, very strictly organized and centralized system coming from China. And hopefully, in a couple of years, there will be a strong third system that the EU comes up with. And I want to remind everyone that the world is not only China, the US, and the 27 EU countries. It's 193 countries. And most of them will be looking at those three systems that we will see established in the future. And they will have to decide at some point in time which system they will follow. And I think what we all should aim for is to come up, not maybe with the fastest system, but with the one system that is looking into individual rights at the same time and looking into a very innovative and dynamic technological advancement. And if we were able to bring that together, I think Europe can have a very strong stand compared to the US and China. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kühnen. We are pretty much already out of time. The interpreters have kindly agreed to stay on for 5 more minutes. So I would like to thank you very much for your contributions. Just to very quickly sum up from today, again, thank you all for joining in. It has been a very interesting exchange. We do have a dual task ahead of us, maybe a triple one. So not only decarbonization and digitization, but also asserting our spot in the world again. We need to make use of the expertise. We do have it here in Europe. The contributions have shown this very clearly. We have a lot of good practices from companies that we need to put out there. And I think here the committee is already a very good multiplier, a very good platform for doing this. So thank you very much for allowing us to have this seminar here. Obviously, it's a Herculean task, as Mr. Kirchhoff has said. We have a lot of challenges for the economy going on just because of the crisis already, and then we're also facing the transition. But nevertheless, we cannot close our eyes to it. We have to actually face the challenge. A key role for hydrogen, as we have heard, is going to be on the cards now. The development of the infrastructure is going to be key, not only in the decarbonization field, but also in the digitization field, where we do need digital sovereignty. I think this has become very clear. We need the skills for it. We need the framework for developing it. And also, just to echo the call from Mr. Koenen on Gaia X, and for countries to join, and maybe also for you to lobby in your own countries to join this project, which will make it, if successful, one of the key cornerstones for the EU's digital development. So this is my little conclusion on this. I would like to thank a lot the Secretariat for making this happen, and also for having us here. And I would like to give the floor quickly back to Stefano to sort of see us off. And well, the floor is yours, Stefano.
Thank you, Sandra, and congratulations for a very good, very well done job in moderating this session. I think this session has shown us how important it is to have these kind of opportunities to be able to debate, think, and reflect. What is also important is that we as a group now try to bring a bit the information that we have gathered today into something which we can use in our discussions in the months ahead. And that is a challenge which I as president of the group, and also together with the Secretariat and yourselves, will take on. Clearly, to me, there were two elements which were mentioned. One is that we need to have the right frameworks in mind, in place. And these, when I talk about frameworks, I'm talking about the legislative frameworks, the political frameworks, and the physical frameworks. And these are the two elements where I think we as the Employers Group can work on within our sphere of action, which is in Brussels and also back home. With that, I would like to sincerely thank Ms. Ruther, Mr. Kirchhoff, and Mr. Koenen for the really interesting debates. I want to thank all the members for participating very actively. And I want to particularly thank Sandra and Heiko for their really hard work in putting this event together today. Thank you once again. And of course, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the sterling work which we are used to. They have once again delivered. I would like to close off just with a small point of information. I will not wish all of you a good festive season, for the simple fact that we will be organizing, let's say, an informal online social event for the group on Friday the 18th at 5 o'clock. And you will be receiving information over the coming day or so as to what will take place, when and how. So I do ask you to come back again on Friday the 18th at 5 o'clock, so then we can all wish each other well for a good closure of what has been a very difficult year, and to wish each other a good opening for the coming year. So thank you very much, everyone. I wish you a good rest of the day, and keep well and keep safe. Thank you.